Perfect. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Be Not Afraid and our dismantling of ethnic studies. I decided that the most appropriate name for this one would be Getting People to Swallow the Turd, because it really is a hard it really is a hard thing to swallow. And in order to get people to be able to do that, you have to be kind of a master manipulator. So today we're talking about pages, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, I said 30 through 38, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so 30 through 38. And we're really going to dig into Paulo Freire, who he was. He is referenced on these pages, and also how they want teachers to use their identity. Before, in the last pages, I was looking to see if there was anything that we missed. And one thing that I did notice was it is very specific that the teachers must be committed to. They must be fully committed to ethnic studies in order to get that position. And like I said before, the lure of that position could be something as much as $100,000 raise in 1 year. Lastly, before I let everybody else talk, I know I'm talking a lot, but this morning I was watching someone else's commentary about schools. It's a group called Teacher Therapy. And I said something about ethnic studies, and somebody got on it and said that I was lying and that ethnic studies is just teaching about cultures. So I want to encourage you. We don't do this. We aren't doing this just to give our own views and to throw a bunch of quote unquote right-wing talking points at you. That's the reason why we show you what is in the books, that is in the curriculum plan. And it's the reason why we're taking all of this time. I don't even know what episode we're on. I could have called it episode Who the Heck Knows, but I think swallowing the turd's appropriate. So, all right, ladies, let's jump in. So Brooke, you're the one who came up with that's what it feels like. So explain it, will you? You're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
I couldn't understand why people would want Paulo Freire's information. Like, basically, it's let's talk about how much everybody hurts and why they hurt and where your hurt comes from and who caused it. And it just sounds like, and not to say that we don't have a place in our lives to do that, but the intentions for which he created it, and to get teachers to want to have their students spending their time in their day doing this. Like I would rather have a classroom of content kids to talk with and to teach, rather than ones who are getting all bitter and mad and wanting to march around. And so it's like when I was reading his theory and thinking of all the people or the teachers who have bought into this, or administrators, or people who are pushing this content, I'm like, how in the world can he convince people to eat poop? Because that's what it seems like to me, as far as what good is it going to cause? How is this going to remedy it? We haven't seen proof that it actually remedies stuff, but for what his intents and purposes are, it's causing a lot of harm. So I said that because I don't understand the appeal to the people that are using this without having the intention of, changing to communism or Marxism. Like, if that's their intention, I get it, but I don't understand the draw, since communism killed more people in this world than anything. And so, power. Yeah. People want power. And so, if you can eat poop to be powerful or something, I guess that's what it is. But as far as your average citizen, what's the draw of this? I'm very confused.
I think personally that this has been an undercurrent for a very long time. And when you cease teaching, which I was thinking how long ago they started really pushing American history, learning of the Constitution, the founding fathers. I mean, they did that when I was in school, but I don't know it diminishes every year to the point where kids do not know anything about their own government. And when you have an empty mind and you can start feeding on emotions, a child is so easily influenced. And so I agree with you. For a mature individual, an adult who knows straight out his philosophy, I don't understand it, but this has been an undercurrent that's been moving through the system for a long time, with minds that are not prepared to defend much of anything. You just force feed them. That's my take on it.
Yes, with minds that aren't prepared to defend. I love it. So how would we defend it? How would those who can see this defend it? They can't even see it because there's not the comparison. So I love what you said, Lynn.
Well, and then the adults are going along, and I do think that the reason that they're willing to even, taste the turd is because it's tied up with so much. It's tied up with whether or not they're a good person. We're living in a time where morality is determined by the mob.
And that's a good point, Carrie, because it's a guilt thing that they're putting people on now. Whether you're an adult, especially a child, because they're in the school system, but it's even playing on the adults.
Yeah.
So it's this guilt.
Right.
I want to be a good person, so and they don't have the true meaning of what is meant by these people on the different vocabulary words that they're throwing out there as being good.
And I think that that's one of the cool things about this particular group is every one of us has been in front of a classroom with kids. So one of the things that I found interesting in these sections, and Brooke, if you'll pull it up, just the part about identity, they're talking about how teachers cannot get the kids to buy in, i.e., I'm going to say it again, swallow the turd. Teachers can't get the kids to buy into this miserableness unless they've built a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're encouraging teachers to share their own identities. And I think that it's almost like in the classroom, we would give a reward chart to our kids. This is almost giving a reward to teachers. You are absolved of because first they have to get them to buy in that they are guilty because they come from privilege. They were able to go to a university, perhaps more than likely, they come from a quote unquote cis heteronormative background. And so in order to absolve themselves from that, they need to be gung-ho about this stuff, even if, behind closed doors, they aren't. But one of the things I found interesting is that as teachers or as educators, we're now supposed to build that relationship. And I think what we're supposed to do is cut down the boundaries that teachers have historically always had. What do you guys think about that?
That's what James Lindsay said when he was unpacking Paulo Freire. And I really like what he said. It says, let me see, believe it or not, what do you want? I don't remember what he said, but he mentioned that you break that barrier for grooming because there's a natural barrier, and not even in a sexual sense, but just in a hey, this is who I'm getting you ready to be, an activist or a Marxist or whatever, and you have that bond. Of that trusted bond, so you can introduce these nefarious, and I say nefarious because communism and Marxism is, even if it's not sexual, there's still a part of it that is evil and detrimental to society and you as a person, to want to take away your liberty and your freedom. So, breaking that barrier and saying you're just as important in building that trust. So anyway.
Yeah. Tammy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. They say they're not teaching critical race theory, but this is critical race theory. So privilege and implicit biases and all this is, and lived experiences. It's not my lived experiences. It's only if you have a certain skin color, your lived experiences. And it's so divisional, and it is not unity. It's not like what you said yesterday, e pluribus unum, out of many one. It is divide. It is so concerning. It just angsts me. And it's deeply disturbing. So this is critical race theory. So they can say, we're not doing it. It's right here. But you have to have studied critical race theory to know that it is here.
Right. And I don't think most teachers are actually studied it. I think most teachers would, if you ask them, say, oh, I don't believe in that, but they don't understand that that's what they are being spoon fed. But I do want to hit that because it's underlined here, lived experiences as assets. Again, if this is your first time watching, you can tell if you're obviously watching because I haven't put this on podcast yet, but you can tell that I'm not white. I also come out of the foster system, and I am high on the scale, on the trauma scale that's called the ACEs, or the advanced childhood effects of trauma testing. And so on all of those, my lived experiences should count. But because I do not have the right, as Paulo Freire would say, type of knowing, or Marxists would say the right type of knowing, I'm pushed to the sides. So my views are not relevant in these circles. So despite the fact that we have been looking for DEI liaisons and people who can talk about the quote unquote ethnic experience, I would never be considered for those positions in my district because I'm not pushing the right kind of lived experience, the right kind of view.
Right.
So, so that's an interesting thing because identity, what we're seeing a lot, at least out here in my district, is basically a don't ask, don't tell about your identity, your gender identity. That's kind of the way that they're pushing it. But at the same time, ethnic studies is right around the corner, and they absolutely say that it is essential to bring queerness into the classroom.
Which is interesting because ethnic studies, it doesn't say race studies, but it further down, I mean,
for gender,
which is ethnic studies means everything, and then it just means race. And so I've just been understanding an experience of race, and culture or social justice, all of these different, it's just everything that is difficult in life, except for, well, that they want to focus on, right?
And it really is, it's just social justice. That's what we're doing. We're taking the time of school to put social justice training.
So,
well, it's so, oh, I'm sorry, Tammy.
No, it's okay.
It's someone else's definition of social justice. Go ahead, Tammy. I'll shut my mouth.
Well, LGBTQIA is at the top of the next page. So I'm like, ethnic studies. Oh, LGBTQIA. This is, what is this doing in the schools? What? We're supposed to teach our kids to read and write. This is political belief, ideology. So this is religious. This is wrong. This does not belong in school.
Well, it doesn't. I definitely don't think that it belongs in our elementary classes. So that exclusion is creating an imagination gap where children are growing up without experiencing windows, mirrors, doors. Okay, this one always ticks me off because they'll say that you need a mirror in order to learn. And that's the whole needing to be reflective. You need to see yourself in the books that you read. And it's just, I believe that you can learn so much from looking out a window. You can look at someone else's perspectives. And so here they will say that you can look at someone else's perspective, but you are only allowed. Another thing that I was watching today was a person who was talking about his first year of teaching. And he said, they're having us read so many books about American oppression. And if it was just one book, like George Takei's book about internment camps, if it was one book, that would make sense. But it's layer upon layer upon layer of getting these kids to only think about, what is the thing we used to hear? Like, what goes in is what comes out, right? So if you're always putting things that are critical about America, and we're having this here in Utah, for the last 2 years, a few classrooms, their literature has been nothing but black and white oppression. Just story after story after story of black and white oppression. And so I think that we have to be aware that not everything is going to have a label of critical race theory on it. Sometimes it's going to be in the praxis. And the praxis is that, or is it praxis? Correct me, somebody who's more linguistic than I am. But
yeah,
is it praxis? Yeah. So what that means is that it won't always say, now open up your books, we're going to do critical race theory learning. In fact, it very seldom will, because kids know, they're aware of those words. Instead, it will be, here's one book, and then you're going to finish and read this other book, and you're going to read another book, and every single one of them starts off with why America sucks.
So, you know how I was doing the history of, at the Constitution thing, I was doing it for Mary Catherine Goddard. Now she ran a newspaper, and during constitutional time, she ran a newspaper and was the first postmaster. She was very influential. Then it was all taken from her. And I felt this, and then I ordered the children's book to see how they portrayed her, because I told the whole story as I was presented it. And then I ended with this thing of like, and then they took it away from her because they were sexist and didn't want it. And then they took this away from her. But then she freed her slave. And then, I like told the whole story, because I felt this, I want to be accurate in what it is. But what does that leave my reader with? Like my learner, the people listening to me,
right?
They were left with, oh God. And especially the men, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, these poor women couldn't survive on their own. They couldn't have a job that was taken away from them, which is what happened to her. Right. So I really struggled with how to present my character in a way that was both accurate and left my listeners with her achievement and not her distress. I didn't want, I was leaving the end of the story because the end of her life, it was distressing, right? So then I began to tell the story of, I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of forming America. I put in that ending, but right. It's a difficult position to accurately tell the whole story, but still leave them with the essence of achievement. Like I still listen to singers who like, why do you still like them? They did a bad thing. I'm like, well, guess what? David in the Bible, how did he end up? But we still tell the story of David and Goliath, and so what are they going to do with the information that you have? And so how you send out the content and what you focus on, and especially the victories, is what they're getting, even in the telling of the whole story. So when you say it's in the praxis, and being so thoughtful in the development of how we convey this, and in order to help learners internalize as well, where are they? Everybody's going to be different. For instance, my daughter, when her teacher told her about, Hitler and killing Jews, she came home to me after 2 weeks after she'd been churning in her head. She's like, Mom, all the people with blonde hair and blue eyes were killed, and and she didn't get it. So there's even that factor of the individuals and the age, and are they ready for this, and what are they getting?
Right.
So I'm saying just the content alone is concerning enough, but the difficulty in the delivery of this content is,
Well, they're
Worse.
teaching, I mean, reading then becomes a mean of self-affirmation, otherwise known as narcissism. You know, they're everything, being told that everything has to revolve around yourself. If it doesn't revolve around yourself, you can't learn from it. What a bunch of turd.
Well, what the video mentioned was
And the video we're talking about is
Ye-
James Lindsays.
yes,
Is How Schools Make You Stupid. Is that the one?
the
That's okay.
I can't say his name right.
Okay.
What was that?
Paulo Freire.
There you go. I'll just call him Paulo.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Paulo.
So an interesting remark was made in that, and this is the sad thing, is that too many teachers, especially the ones just coming out of the universities, are unaware, really, of how this is moving in, because he made the statement, they are not teaching Marxism. Marxism is in the whole concept. They're not teaching kids about Marxism and how to become the socialist, and that is already in the curriculum. So what the kids are getting in school, you don't even have to say that it's this or it's that, or if it's critical race theory. It's there.
Right.
so
Without even putting a label on it.
I want to push back, because I don't want things to be discounted and say, well, it's not in the school, because I send my kids to public school. I don't see what he's talking about in their school right now. So when you say it's already there, can you give me concrete examples? Is it a specific place? Is it in the structure? Because people haven't listened to this essay or this video that we're talking about. So when you say it's already there, if you could be more specific, it might be more easier to understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Lynn.
Oh, what? I was sidetracked. Okay. So your question to me was, Brooke, is to just say that concepts are already there.
You said it's already there. And I think listening to what he was explaining, like, you need that background information to make sense of what you just said. So I was asking you to supply specifics.
Okay. So in now I'm not in California anymore. We're in Utah, where it's here, but a lot of parents are not seeing it. But when you are especially talking about ethnic studies, and I know Carrie's been involved with this up in Salt Lake, anytime you are using the word oppression, supremacy, whiteness, privilege, that is all very that's divisive language, and that is teaching Marxism, because what you're doing is you're pitting people, especially students, which is the most tragic thing of all, is you're pitting students against one another. And when Sleater talks about, or in the manuscripts that we've been reading, and she talks about the unity, and it makes people better, and it joins people together, it does not. It does the complete opposite. So when you incorporate those words, that language that we see throughout this manuscript, it is, hey, I'm just going to call it like I see it. It is it's full on Marxist. It's a divisive language to keep the populace at odds with one another. So the elected, and I'm not talking about votes. I'm talking about those who feel that they are elitists for whatever reason and have the power to influence, so that the party belongs to them.
right?
That's how I see it.
And so what
Can
I,
I?
oh,
Oh.
go ahead. Mhm.
I was just going to share that I believe it's already in our culture. So if you look back 4 years ago, how many times did I hear on the news the term white supremacy? I never heard white supremacy except it was the Ku Klux Klan years ago. Now you've got a president who says our greatest problem is white supremacy. So I believe I hear white supremacy like all the time, and it never was in our language. I have a cousin's daughter who's in schools in Seattle that feels guilty for being white. So I have there's evidence of this a child down in San Diego that says, Mommy, I don't want to be like with your side of the family because you're white, but I want to be like Daddy because he's Black. And so I believe it's already in our society, unfortunately.
Can I give you some concrete things that I've seen? Some
Mhm.
concrete things, okay? A teacher in a local school teaching the kids that as a fact, not as an opinion, but as a fact, Ebonics is the official language of African Americans. These are the places where I start to go, you don't know that that's a fact, but somebody taught you. So now you have this new sense of knowing. Remember, knowing they're now in charge of the new knowledge. There is an elitism that comes because Marx literally teaches that you must, and I think I said this at the beginning, but that you must push the current people who know. So if you go back to Pol Pot, you will find that they killed the teachers and their children. They were sent to work in the fields in re-education camps. The same things happened in China. They killed the educators, the people who already had a sense of knowing, because it was the wrong kind of knowing. So I will listen because I put myself through this craziness. I will listen to critical race debates, and they will say things like, oh, we don't put any stocks in books because we know from our own experience. And so that's the kind of thing that is tangibly happening. Another thing is that people are completely teachers, not all teachers, let's be clear on that. Not all teachers, but some teachers, and I'd say at least one in every school is a pretty good guesstimate, okay, are completely ignoring the laws, the legislation, whether that comes from books or what like pornography in books, or whether that comes from teaching about race, or whether that comes from to supporting LGBTQIA in the classroom. It doesn't matter that our legislators have said, no, you can't do this. They're saying, watch me. And that is Marx. Marx literally said, we can't wait till we're all in power. We just have to start taking and taking and taking. And that, I think, is what we're watching happening in most schools, to some, even if it's a minor degree.
And I think the biggest shift, it's not, I mean, it is the content too, but as far as how it's run and what's expected of schools, you know, before we used to expect, you know, academics, and there are academics, but now it's more of a cure-all for all of society. And it's for you know, health and wellness and
child, right?
Little whole child health centers. So whereas it used to be that, now it's a training center for your social, emotional, you know, all of your needs are being met there. And I think that's more of what James Lindsay was talking about when he said, you know, teacher and learner on the same one. It's not academics, because academics, they know more. But when they're down here, what are they discussing? They're just talking about their experience, and they're trying to connect and talk about their community and what they can do there. So schools are becoming more of a training center for community activation or activism rather than academics. And that was the difference that I noticed for James Lindsay's Paulo Freire's purpose of education. It wasn't academics. And I don't want to do a blanket statement saying it's not academics. My kids are learning to read and write. So, but it is, everybody can probably agree that schools are more than ever dealing with and trying to deal with the social, emotional, everything of the kid, and, you know, values, everything. So
Yeah, they're
Well,
valued. Go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
so sorry. I don't want to talk too much, but you know, these chapters are getting me on fire. Anyway, the problem is that, you know, Brooke, we make the statement, yes, the academics are being taught here in Utah presently, and I know that they are in many of the classes. However, our neighboring states, California, hey, I don't know, correct me, Tammy. I've been out of there for a few years, but California, Oregon, I mean, and I don't know what other states are involved, have exempted people of color from having to graduate, needing to know reading, writing, arithmetic. They don't need to. So when Sleater talks about the fact that the education is, I don't know, higher expectations, educations, higher graduations, I'm going to say what? You know, so I don't know.
Well, the lady that I was running against for Fresno Unified, she was bragging, saying that, you know, we're going to have 100% graduation rate. So the kids, as far as they're fine, graduate everyone. That's equity, equal outcomes. But they can't read. They can't read and they can't do math. Sorry about the dog. I'll go to another room. But they're not academically qualified to go out in the world and lead successful lives. I'm going to go into another room because of this wiener
Well, and
dog.
that's what's scary, is that this isn't about whether or not they're qualified, because they're still getting the jobs. There are jobs being left open for people who are not qualified. Another thing that I was watching today was, I obviously watched several things today, but another thing was a mental health counselor in California who they had to leave spaces open for trans people to come in as therapists. And then these people would walk in and they would get rid of the parenting magazines because parenting is harmful. So what people need to understand ultimately is that what ethnic studies does is it's about changing societal norms. Anything that we as a Western civilization has said, this is a good idea, they want gone. And the thing is that people will argue and say, that's not true, we don't want that, but that's because they don't know their own stuff. You can be a Marxist without having ever read Marx.
Another critical thing that's going on right now in California is AB 1078. Bonta wants to take away the board ability to pick curriculum, and Bonta wants to control, like, you will read at this ethnic studies book, this is what you will do, and take away local control from the school board. So there's a big fight in California.
And when teachers don't understand what democracy is, we have a massively huge problem. When teachers think that promoting, I know that this is what I saw in Washington. I saw teachers, you know, we'll decorate our rooms, our classrooms with Winnie the Pooh or a favorite book or something. In Washington, one of my son's teachers decorated the room in democracy. And if they're not teaching the kids that democracy is mob rule, if we're watching our elections and we're seeing 2024 to protect our democracy, democracy is never mentioned in the Constitution for a reason, because they realize that it would bring authoritarianism. The other thing that we're greatly seeing in our schools is elitism. Parents will send a letter to the teachers and say, I'm concerned about this. And the teachers will literally respond, well, you need to trust me because we as teachers are the experts. And that is that knowing versus the knowledge holders. We're the experts. I might be 22 years old. I might not even have any children of my own, but you need to trust me to be the expert on your child. And your children are going to be taught when they walk into my room that my room is a safe place. And the things that happen in my classroom stay in my classroom, because we want to make sure that everyone in our classroom feels safe.
That's sick. That is sick, deceptive.
And that comes down to, again, what we were looking at in these pages, that building that relationship with the kids. I'm going to keep you safe. It's my job as your teacher to make sure that all of you are safe. And is that true? Absolutely. But it's important to know what safety means, because safety, these people mean if you don't affirm your child's gender stuff that we've been pushing down their throat, then you're unsafe and you should go to jail. There's literally people saying that people should go to jail if they don't embrace all of this. So that is happening. And
There's a big war going on in California right now. There are schools that have adopted parent notification policy, and there are many, many activists. There's 2 conservative teachers in Escondido that the policy in Escondido was to keep secrets from the parents. And so these 2 Christian teachers said, no, I cannot do that. Now, I was in a Zoom meeting with a bunch of lawyers and board members that are in this, don't keep secrets, and in this conservative movement. It's weird to say conservative movement. I just think it's a normal movement to do normal things that are holding on to this. So the 2 conservative teachers in Escondido, they won. Wow. They won. And believe it or not, it was a transgender therapist that testified in the court. And she said, absolutely, parents should be involved. And this transgender therapist said, kids should have a year of therapy before they even socially transition. And so there's a big war tonight. There's a LGBT activist. They're going to Clovis Unified, and they're descending because the Clovis Unified has a parental notification policy. And oh my gosh, there is a spiritual battle.
And that comes back to the knowing. That comes back to that person who's transgender. Sounds like maybe a qualified therapist.
Yes.
Her voice or their voice, I don't know, whatever. The person's voice doesn't matter, and they can be attacked. So these people who are constantly saying, we are about love, love is love, inclusion, will call out somebody who's actually gone through this, who is that person, because they don't have the right voice. I want to go back to, just because I like the idea of looking at our pages and running through them, just so that people know that we basically stayed on topic. So
I'm sorry I took us off a little, but
no,
it's all tied together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are on, what page are we on this?
This is page 37. I can go
Okay,
back.
good.
Do you want me to go back?
Yeah, let's go back just to make it sure. So this is identity and purpose. Let's go up to purpose.
Okay. I mean, just the start right here, they say it all. We don't even need to say it. So if you don't believe what we're saying, they say it themselves. Ethnic studies teaching is grounded in the belief that education could be a tool for transformation, social, economic, and political change and liberation. There's nothing about academics in there. And then there's citation.
And they will say that they're not political.
Yeah, it's Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right down there. And so
my goodness.
They quote him and say, this is the whole purpose of what we're doing. So if you don't believe it, go read Paulo Freire and see what his intents and purposes are. It's not academic. And even right here, diverse curriculum, this meaningful, supportive, educational spaces are the same, this bridge between institutions and community. So It's not a place of learning. It's a bridge. It's a training center for the whole community and agents of change right here.
And if your community, if your business, this is what I already saw in Washington, why we fled. Because if your business does not support these things, these kids have been taught to be activists, and they will walk up and they will catch you, they will trick you into saying something, or they'll even just take a picture of your license plate and they will put it out there, and they will find out what they can and tell people to not support your business. You don't get to be neutral in this. In Washington, and I think I said this yesterday, they actually said, put a black square in your window. If you don't want the activists to come to you, you need to put a black square in your window so that we know that you support what we're doing. That's what it means when they say community. No matter whatever else they say, this is where it goes.
Now, excuse me, who said to put the black square up? I'm not familiar.
It was BLM. It
And
was
this was
Antifa.
recently?
This was BLM and Antifa. This was 2 years ago. The
Okay,
shocking
okay.
thing I saw was somebody who was Jewish willing to do it. You need to let that sink in.
I almost put a black square on Facebook. That's before I learned what was going on. That was my awakening. I almost put the black square up, and then I started investigating and went, uh-oh.
It's not a whole lot different than telling somebody to put a star in their window. So it's
1930s Germany.
you're with us or you're against us.
Yeah.
Identifying that those who are with us and who aren't in that respect.
Yes.
In
And
order to force compliance.
Yes. Yeah.
And it says on this page, social justice organizers and advocates engage citizens at the local, state, and national levels. So those are activists.
Yes. They don't even pretend. It's right there in front of your face. And that is the goal for your children. Can we scoot down real quick?
Go ahead.
Well, so even though we can see this, the direct connection, people can say, well, I'm not doing it. This isn't what I'm doing. How can we convince them that participating in this willingly, or saying they are, or doing their own benign version of it, right? Because they're being forced to do it. How can we get them to help so that it's not damaging to all of society? Even if they're doing a benign version in their classroom, what can they do?
I think they've got to do their research. We cannot force them. We cannot be the authoritarians that we're trying to fight. But if you do your research and you take a look, you will see that the exact same tactics, and that's why it's so horrifying. I've spoken to multiple people who've escaped communism, whether that's from Africa, which we don't know that there's communism in Africa, but there is, and from China. And I've talked to some Europeans who lived under it, and they're all saying that what we're doing is exactly what they ran away from. So first off, you have to give yourself mercy. If you are a person who's in this, you have to give yourself some grace, because you can't help it that this is what you were taught. Then you have to understand that some of the biggest and strongest fighters are people who once believed it, and then they opened up their eyes. And that is, I'm trying to keep religion out of it, but I think it is a gift to both us, those of us who've been fighting for all this time, and also to yourself, to be able to know what's on the other side. You don't need to be wrapped up in some sort of guilt because of it.
Well, religion is a part of it, though. You can't take it out. Religion is a set of beliefs, one way or the other. And so there's no way you can separate that from what we're doing right here.
I agree, but then at the same time, there's James Lindsay, who's like the King Arthur of the whole movement, and he would call himself agnostic, but he does realize that the only way that we hold on to our country is to return to some of that Judeo-Christianity that we had before 2008, because in
It's a set of
2008 is when things started to fall apart.
Yeah, it's a set of values. Where are your values? So to
Yes.
me, you cannot separate it. You don't have to talk about one religion, another, and being Buddhist or being Tibetan or whether it's on the left or the right is religion.
Yes.
And Karl Marx, whoever is out there doing what they've done and what they're doing, they are religious concepts. They are a set of beliefs that they want promoted.
Yes. There's another thing that I was listening to said, Jesus was the guy, Christians were the people, and Christianity was the idea. Marx is the guy, Marxists are the people, and Marxism is the thing. And it doesn't matter that they're not completely following Marx. There were some things that I heard about Marx that I was like, well, if I lived in that time, that would make a lot of sense to me, because I tend to be a relatively open-minded person. But the people who are implementing this today, they don't really align with all of the things even he said. There were things where he would say, the people who are not capable. Well, today's people who are not capable, it's not a matter of they can't walk, it's a matter of they don't want to walk. So that's the difference.
And Karl Marx, if you don't mind me saying, and I'm not a studier of communism and Karl Marx and whatever, but I do know that Karl Marx did want to run the show. He wanted things to go the way he felt they should go. That takes away choice.
And that's something that people need to understand all the way through this whole thing, is that there are people at the top who are never going to live like this. So you have to understand, as our friend Julie has says, that you've been duped. And you need to give yourself grace with that and not feel like you're being bullied by somebody saying that, because we aren't saying it. There's not a single person here who has shed tears for what we know. We aren't saying this out of hatred. We want you to be educated and to understand that you are leading without even knowing it. You are grooming these kids into a cultural red guard, just like Mao. And if you don't know that, shame on the people who educated you in the first place.
Exactly. Well put.
Let's see if there's anything else. I think
this just kind of jarred me, because I'm like, this is so unacademic to unpack your own identity and to teach a kid who they are. That's for the family. That ties into the purpose of life.
Yes.
Where they came from. I'm like, number one, you're teaching my kid who they are. That doesn't belong in schools. No. And they're making it belong in schools. And who is my family and community? So that there's an SEL program, social emotional learning program, that was in my kid's school. So of course I get it and I read the whole thing and I highlight stuff and circle and share it with the teacher and the principal and say, this is where it's concerning, because you never, ever mention the family as part of my child's identity. The only mention of the family was in a little scenario where they were supposed to figure out what to do, and the person's family had done something wrong to the child. What were they supposed to do? That was the only mention of family. And I said, and there wasn't anything, it was like being nice to people and blah, blah, blah. But I said, the absence of family in here when you're talking about their identity. And then there was a work page on, they had to find out who is their trusted adult. And I was like, oh, I want you to talk to my kid about that. No, I will talk to my kid about that. It should have said, go home and talk to your parents about who the trusted adults are in your life. And it didn't say that at all.
Some will say the opposite. Some will say, who outside of your family is your trusted adult?
Oh my goodness.
That has absolutely happened.
I'm thinking I'm
Yes.
thinking here of boundaries,
Yes.
boundaries.
Yeah.
The school's job is to teach reading, writing, and math, and maybe some character like pillars of integrity and telling the truth and blah, blah, blah. But it is not to parent and teach this. It's actually a religious belief system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reli-
It's a cult.
religious- It is.
Yeah, who is my
a cult
family?
of misery. It is literally a cult of misery. How do people join a cult that literally says critical? We're all supposedly
I know.
about our mental health and our social, our well-being and everything else, but we're supposed to spend all of our time thinking about looking at everything through this lens of critical and why somebody harmed me and how they harmed me.
And
What
let
a
me-
miserable way to live. And then
And
to put that on children.
Right.
Sorry. But
And some terms of recovery coming from a person of recovery is that resentment is the number one offender. You're going to be an addict, an alcoholic, if you are resentful.
Mhm.
And also another part of recovery is gratitude and owning our part of the wrongs. And so all of this is all like feeding in, it's feeding into resentment and being sick. And recovery is also we're as sick as our secrets. So this is teaching you to you know, who's your safe person, and you know, I'm a safe place, and it's just very twisted.
and so many of the quote unquote safe people are being arrested. Have you noticed
Ooh,
that? How
yes.
many, like there's a lot of people who teach SEL and teach, I shouldn't say a lot, I need to not be hyperbolic.
Mhm.
I'm seeing episodes of people who teach SEL and who do not report on children being sexually abused, because are they really abused? Is it really that? Because I mean, if there's no such thing as innocence, then maybe
They like it. Maybe it's their
Maybe
right
they
to sexual
like it.
pleasure.
exactly. So no, I think that that's perfect. That this stuff breaks the boundaries, and educators should always have a boundary. Your role is to be an asset to these kids as they progress in their education. Your role is not to replace their parents. You are not paid to be their therapist. And that's a whole nother thing, but I highly recommend people think twice about seeing a mental health professional today.
Well, and
yeah.
even this whole right here, build community within the classroom, like that's necessary. Everything that functions well, you have to have a sense of community. But then they say, be comfortable with sharing pieces of your own identity and lived experience. It's pretty much like, let's go have some group therapy, be untrained, break down the barriers between all the students who can use that against other students. Now, not saying that it will happen, but I've opted my kids out of all of the SEL stuff. And my kid's like, why, Mom? And I've looked through the programs and I'm like, because I don't want you in a classroom disclosing all of your feelings to everybody else. It's communistic and it's untrained therapy and they're not licensed in it. And it could go south. And there are kids who can disclose that in front of everybody else. And so it's just a really bad idea.
And what else does being comfortable mean? It means that if somebody identifies as a fish, well, in order to make sure that they feel comfortable, you have to affirm.
Mhm.
That's literally, so you can't really opt out. That is the trick, is that when this is immersed into our schools, it's all the way across the line. So you can't. Go ahead. Yes, Brooke.
Yes, you can't opt out, but in order to have warrior kids, and I believe one of my kids is like a super warrior, they need to be able to identify it and know they have to stand up to it. So it's really useful. I mean, I would like to protect my kids from things, but it's saturated in the culture and they have to understand why some of these things are not okay. And so when they're bringing it up, what's wrong with it? What do you say instead? And where are the boundaries between you and the teacher and the kids? Because the whole reason that Paulo Freire is accepted. You know, the title of our thing is "Why Are You Eating Poop?" or whatever you called it, swallowing turd.
Swallowing the turd.
Anyway, so the whole reason, and which you brought up, is because to absolve ourselves of guilt. People have guilt. They have this propaganda that has caused them to have guilt around it. And that's why they're eating it. They're like, if this makes me a better person because I'm a bad person, then I'm going to do it. That's the only reason, is this absolution of guilt. So if you have a classroom filled with people who are listening to stories of people, they're going to get some of that guilt. There's some of that propaganda to make sure that this continues. These centers, these training centers, continue to educate, not in academics, but in how to socially navigate from a groupthink mentality. So that's why, you know.
I will say it's hard though. Just an example, I'm only now starting to homeschool. And when my son was in 5th grade, they did a Socratic seminar, and it was the 3rd book that they read on gender fluidity. And my son was like, honestly, I'm very tired of reading these books. It's just 3 books, one after another, and I'm tired of it. And it was the class, it was the students, because the teacher didn't have to, because the teacher had created that teachable moment classroom. So one student says, I really don't like that you're not being very accepting. That worries me. And I think that you should just be a more kind human being. And then another kid, and then another kid. And, you know, he got lucky because some of his friends said, I don't blame you for what you said. But even in that 5th grade classroom, those kids were not willing to defend him in the classroom. They waited until they were outside when they could tell him, well, honestly, we agree with you, but our children are learning to self-censoring. That's what these teachable moments look like.
It's because they don't want to go against the teacher. It's an authority figure. And that's really scary. And you know, so they're simultaneously teaching stand up and demand chocolate milk, but not against me, you know?
Right.
Only if I say you can. Only
Stand
if
up and go in the direction that we're telling you to. Our children are the water carriers. They are being trained to be activists, to fight when they are supposed to, and to be docile narcissists when they're not.
And so I think for good teachers who want to continue teaching and don't want to go into this, you know, to just be aware of this. What I really don't want to be this about pointing fingers, but I want it to be about the dangers that are inherent in what this is. So it's not, hey, they're doing this, and it's like, this is a possibility. This is what's already happening. And in order to prevent it, please just look at this, you know, research this on your own and say, if this were happening in my classroom, what could I do to strengthen those kids who need to know that their voices matter, even if it goes against what I'm saying, you know? And they just back off on the topic of like identity. I'm not saying they should even go there, but in some things.
Yeah, I think that teachers need to find underground networks. If they just need to look around in these trainings, and when they see other people who are zoning off or who have a face of they're not buying it or biting into the turd. I don't know how many times I've said that, but yeah. So however many people aren't doing that, you need to create your own support group. And
Wait.
I do. Go ahead. Okay.
Why secret? Why does it have to be secret? I think it needs to be loud and obvious.
Because it's hard. And I think we have to be fair and honest that what's going on is abusive, and you're not always ready to express your abusiveness. But if you build these groups, if you build your secret groups of support, and then eventually as your numbers get larger, then you can stand. That's what and I will tell you that I have teachers who send me private messages. I just got one today, an email from a teacher saying, thank you for what you're doing. I live in your district and I appreciate it. So
Carrie,
things are happening.
what is it when you talk to her? she asked you that question or made that statement to you. Thank you for what you are doing. How does she know what you're doing is what I'm saying. What you're doing right now in putting on these podcast meetings to kind of go through what's coming or what's in part already here.
Right.
So what did you say to her?
Well,
I mean,
she
how did
she found my stuff, or they found my stuff through through another podcast that I do. Sometimes I'm on with my friend Leslie on the Radical Center, and her group, which is a larger platform. And so they find it there, and then they go, "Oh wow, you're in our district." And so then they send me messages, and I just say basically what I'm saying all the time and why we do this. You aren't alone. There are people standing, and also knowledge is power. If you want what you need to be able to stand up, then you have to have knowledge. You cannot go screaming and being a banshee and attacking school boards. You have to be the most polished person in the room and the most informed. You have to do that. And if you do that, you will gain followers. I think we should stop there for today, just because I don't like to go over. And that did take us all the way through page 38. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
We'll
you.
probably be back on tomorrow if that works for you. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.